What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm gonna talk today about something that I looked at, something that I constantly always analyze and always keep up to date, and that is the U.S. debt clock. You can find this at usdebtclockorg.com. Find this information on there, and then this is something that I look at a couple times throughout the year, just to see what the state of our economic level is in the United States. You can say that, or where we're at throughout the year, and it gives me a little bit of insight on draw a conclusion about where we can see the direction in which our United States or this country is going. So I look at this, the U.S. national debt clock, and the first thing I'm going to go over, if you look at the left-hand side, I'm going to zoom in here. The first one is the U.S. national debt clock. Basically, the definition of this, the national debt outstanding represents the face amount or principal amount of the marketable and non-marketable securities currently outstanding. That's the actual definition of the U.S. national debt. And you guys can see here, we're about $32.4 trillion of U.S. national debt owed, and that's equates to $96,933 that each citizen owes. But then if you take the debt per taxpayer and how this is calculated, it's basically taking the U.S. national debt and dividing it by the number of taxpayers in the United States. Gives you a lot higher number because there are less taxpayers than there are citizens. So that's how you get that number of 252,535 on this case on there. So we look down here is something you guys probably have heard a lot in the news, the budget deficit, or you always keep hearing this every year about raising the deficit. Here we can see U.S. federal spending, the official numbers are out on there. You give the numbers that they gave us. And then if you look at the other side, it's $1.5 trillion of federal budget deficit. And we've been in constant deficit for, I don't think we've ever been on budget for the last, 20 years probably? We've never really met the budget. So the definition of this for the budget deficit is basically this: the difference between the total amount spent by Congress and the revenue received by the Internal Revenue Service. That's how you get the budget deficit on here. But the numbers on the bottom is the actual reported numbers. And that's 6.3 trillion. And that's what's being reported. And the actual deficit numbers are the ones that are collected by the federal government on there. If you look at these ratios, and we go to 1960, we had a U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio of 52%. 1980 is actually went down, so we were at 34.6%. Then 2000, we came back up to 57% to debt to GDP ratio. And now we're basically at 122% of our gross domestic product. So how this is taken is by dividing the national debt by the gross domestic product, and that gives you your percentage ratio on there. So the largest budget items, we all know this, our famous Medicare and Medicaid. We have $1.5 trillion of budgeted money into Medicare and Medicaid. Social Security, $1.2 trillion. As you see, the numbers keep going up because we keep adding more money into these different programs. And then we have our budget here for defense war, $788 billion for defense and war. And that is the total money spent for all branches of the military, including black budgets, equipment, operations, mains, personnel, and war. So we're spending close to $1 trillion in defense. And then the interest on debt is basically what's owed from bonds treasury notes, and that's an interest. That's all on that. So that's on our budgeted items. Now we go down to the next one, which is unfunded debt and interest. U.S. total interest paid $3.7 trillion, about 14,000 per person. And then our U.S. total debt, this is very interesting. This is $101 trillion of unfunded liabilities. Now, two of the biggest numbers to look at that I think are the most important to really get a feel for the health of the overall economy is two things. Is the U.S. national debt, of course, and then the U.S. total debt, which is the unfunded liabilities. So we're at $101 trillion of unfunded liabilities. Now, definition of this U.S. total debt is actually includes household, business, state, local governments, financial institutions, and the federal government. Basically, everything pulled in. That is our total debt. That's a huge, mind-blowing number. So this is two things that I look at, and those numbers that just keep getting bigger, bigger, and bigger because we keep getting into more debt, more money owed, and it seems like it's not slowing down. As you guys can see, the numbers here is definitely not slowing down, and it hasn't been slowing down since I looked at it over 12 years ago. This thing has been, last time I looked at the U.S. national debt, first time I looked at it was $17 trillion. Now we're at $32 trillion, almost more than doubled since the last time I looked at it. So there's definitely something that we definitely need to start taking control of, all of us. If we really want a prosperous future, we really need to look at these things and analyze what's going on here. Over here on the bottom, as I talk, it's the bank interest received by banks, 560, I think it's billion. Yeah, 590 billion. Bank interest paid, and then you will have your total personal debt. So total personal debt, of course, includes mortgage debt, consumer debt, car loans, short-term revolving credit card debt. And that's $73,571 per person, per citizen in the United States. Big number. Like I said, we have unfortunately, a lot of debt that we're carrying with us. And then not just that, but we're also carrying $1.8 trillion of student loan debt. Right now, that's really taking a hit on our economic growth on here, just because each student has an average debt at about $40,000 of student loan debt. And you have the credit card debt, big number as well. So a lot of, like I said, these unfunded liabilities are huge, and we really need to start taking control of these things for sure. Money creation, or the money supply. This is interesting because we don't know if you heard the news. We've had the Federal Reserve raise interest rates to try to cool off inflation. Money, so it's a lot harder, more expensive to acquire dollars, shortening the money supply, trying to control inflation, less dollars in circulation, higher interest rates to borrow money. So try and cut back on the money supply on there to try to curb our inflation numbers that came out. Things like real inflation is like 14% or something, or 8%, 8% or 14% real inflation numbers. And then the Fed keeps saying that their target interest rate wants to be 2%. We've never been at 2% since I've looked at this thing. So that's, they're definitely not telling the truth in there for sure about where they want to take the U.S. inflation numbers on here. So trade balance, trade deficit. We have a trade deficit, $1.6 trillion. And the U.S. trade deficit to China is big. Import oil, we were basically in the red when it comes to trade right now. And we have a big deficit on there. So, and then we looked at, let's go to the right-hand side. Guys, this is the U.S. federal tax revenue collected. It's been increased, 4.7 trillion collected by that. Payroll tax, corporate tax, duties, excessive tax, all that's collected through the federal government. And then you have the state revenue tax, license fees, everything that's collected through the states, $2.2 trillion. revenues, and all these other numbers to look at. State debts. This is another really important one to look at, because if you look at it, there's two main types of state debts. That is general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. So this is a big number too. This is something also to take into consideration. The states are starting to get into borrowing money as well. And look at this. It also puts a U.S. citizen in a debt where you owe average about $3,000 to the state. So they're basically betting on the future on that, and the states getting us into debt on there to borrow for a lot of things that they think is necessary, but at the end of the day, we don't have the information where that money's going anyway. GDP, everybody knows this. It's gross domestic product, 26.4 trillion. Now, the GDP, that's where we get the our ratio, the debt to GDP ratio, is by taking those numbers, taking our national debt and divided by the 26 gives you the percentage number. Income tax, again, payroll tax revenue, collected corporate revenue, tariff revenue, all these different numbers. Total debt to GDP ratio, again, we look at this one. And then spending to GDP ratio, 37%. So we look at all these numbers. And then this is really interesting. And we look at here, tracks the U.S. population. We're about 334 million people and living in the United States right now. U.S. income taxpayers are only actually 128. U.S. citizens who file IRS tax return but owe no taxes is 128 million people. This is the U.S. workforce, total civilian non-farm labor force employment. It's the actual definition. It's 162 million people. And then the official unemployed numbers, what they have, actual unemployed. Compare these, it's U.S. workforce has been kind of like, it only increased a little bit. You look at the private sector jobs, 129 million jobs, and composes all for-profit businesses are not owned or operated by the government. U.S. self-employed people, individuals who work, this is sole proprietorships, partnerships, considered self-employed. About 9 million people, union workers, government employees, manufacturing jobs. And this is really interesting. Look at the manufacturing jobs. We went from 17 million jobs to losing close to over 4 million jobs, a little bit over 4 million jobs. And I did the math right. Yeah, I think close to 4 million jobs lost since 2000 in manufacturing. So we've definitely fallen behind in manufacturing. And we all know what the reasons are behind that, and that's offsourcing over to China and other countries where our manufacturing numbers have gone way down on there. So we have less employee and manufacturing jobs. Numbers of U.S. retirees, 58 million, 58.9 million. Disabled, 8.6 million. U.S. disabled numbers. And then we look at the median income now, 35,923,000. That's a medium household income. Average medium new home now price is 428,126. Well, look at that. It's huge increase from 2000, from 165 to 400, more than 3 times tripled on the properties on there. Good or bad thing? I don't know. You saw what happened in 2008, guys. You can make your own. You can draw your own conclusion on whether you think the raising of home prices this much, it really has a benefit to the economy. We all know again what happened in 2008 with the financial crisis on there. So U.S. bankruptcies is red, as went up. That's why it's red. 415,000 reported by U.S. bankruptcies. Foreclosures, homes and foreclosures are 108,000. People can't meet the obligations of payments, and these numbers are in the red. Living in poverty, 42 million. Without insurance, 27 million. Medicare enrollees, this has increased. Medicaid recipients has also increased. That's why we have, if you look at these numbers, are red. And that's why we're starting to have a deficit, too, on funding the Medicare and Medicaid. So we're starting to, that's why we are accumulating even more debt, just because we have more people retire, more people that are getting the benefits, and then we having to pay for those obligations on there. And so we're not budgeting correctly when it comes to that money being distributed over to those recipients on there. So food stamp recipients, 42 million people on food stamps. Beautiful number, I guess. Green, 22.9 million people are millionaires, supposedly, are in the millionaire category. Actually, there's a definition for this. Let me see what this says. An individual's net worth or wealth is equal to or exceeds to $1 million. So that's what the definition is of U.S. millionaires. Okay, so we have this. And then these are other just ratios calculated on the other right-hand side. So that's interesting. That's why I really like looking at this U.S. national debt clock. And let's go over here and look at our gold and supply demand category. And so let's zoom in on here. Of course, the biggest supplier of gold is China with tons of 36 million ounces of gold hold, followed by the United States. And looking at these countries, Russia, Vietnam have a lot of supply of gold. On the right-hand side is jewelry per ounces held, electronics, total investments in there. Bar demand, coins, metals, and central banks numbers. So you just get data on that. And then if we go back to home sales, this is very interesting. I always like looking at these. As you can see, what I've been talking about the medium household price going up. You can tell here from this calculation that it has went up in price on here. Even this year has gone up. We look at the numbers here. And also the interest rates have fluctuated a little bit, but annual rates, as you can see in 2021, you got right there. So these are important data actually to really look at to see what the state of the sale home prices are going to be. So this is crazy numbers on there. You can see even 2019, if you go 20, 21, and then 22, you can calculate those on there. So let's go to auto sales. Now, this is very interesting, guys, the auto sales. So as we all know, Ford is number one leading the pack. For auto sales is Ford. Here's the numbers for Ford. Over 926,000 cars sold in Ford. Leading by Toyota, if I look correctly here, it's number two. That's two of the most popular vehicles in the United States. And then you have, what's really interesting about this is that Tesla is 365,916. So the EV movement has really risen in the last couple of years, because this number was like 60,000 last time I looked at it a couple of years ago. And now we've more than tripled on the EV sector. So this is, looking at this, guys, now we're going to go to something very interesting now that you guys have seen this. And we're going to go to the energy output. This is very interesting because it's in relation to the autos, or what I was talking about, basically, on there. And I'm sorry, let me go back. Yeah, I think I'm going to go back. Sorry. I was looking at we were looking at the auto, and then this is really interesting. So now we look at precious metals. And as we all know, batteries generated are, you need lithium to be able to produce this. And if you look at your lithium numbers on here, 450% increase in lithium since 2000 in here. So this is a big move, because you can tell how the EV sector has moved so much. Now, 450% increase from 2000, lithium has definitely went up on there. And then you look at other metals, aluminum, iron, of course, went up on there. So, but this is very important. This is the EV movement with the lithium. This is going to be, we have to be careful with this, because we all know that extracting lithium from the ground, actually, it's very polluted. It also pollutes a lot of rivers and lakes. If itself, when you're making this, it's not controlled properly, we can cause a lot of pollution, and it's poisonous to wildlife. So that's got to be really careful. And now that we're over 450% increase, we really got to watch out for how this lithium is being produced on there. So that's very interesting, because of the auto EV movement. Car batteries are made of lithium. And then we go back to the energy output. And this is very interesting to look at the natural gas. We have natural gas, as you guys know in the news, natural gas, Russia holds some of the biggest reserves in natural gas. It's a huge energy consumption that we need. Crude oil. You got crude oil, natural gas on there that are main producers of energy. Coal, a lot of this is held by China. Okay, China uses a lot of coal on there. And then you have nuclear, wind, as you can see, hydroelectric, biofuel, solar terminal. They're lacking extremely behind on there. Those renewable energies. We're still highly dependent on oil and natural gas on there. So this is where we really look at for two main energies is crude oil and natural gas. And so Venezuela holds the biggest reserve of crude oil in the world. So we're going to have in the next couple of years, probably now we're starting to see this. We're fights in between countries with over energy consumptions. And the top 4 countries are China, United States, India, and Russia that use energy on their zone. So that's the U.S. national debt clock. I went over that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different from what I do in construction, but I figured I'd do something like this just because I like to talk about these different types of things that I look at, the data, especially the U.S. debt clock. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on the bottom, guys. I'll bring you guys more videos on the job sites, but I figured I will do this one. So if you want to look at this up, it's just the U.S. national debt, USdebtclock.org, and you can look up all this information. And it's great to look at it a couple times per year just to see where we're at. Hopefully all this can be turned around and we can focus on building a great country. But we really need a lot of work to do, and we need to get a lot of things under control, really. And to do that, it depends on each of us to do our part, educate the audience, educate people, at least get an understanding, to start with at least getting an understanding on how some of these things work so we can tackle the problem, focus on the problem that's in front of us, because we're all part of this together, and economically it all affects us at the end. And hopefully we can come up with a solution where it benefits our country and we live a prosperous life, where we're not burdened by the debt on there. So that's FRC Construction, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you enjoy it. We'll see you there.